During Germany's rearmament in the 1930s, there were a pretty large number of requests for new aircraft to fill a variety of different military roles. One of the most well-known was the fighter competition that led to the Bf-109, but a bit less well-known was a subsequent requirement for a second fighter to complement the 109 in service. The idea was to have two different designs that could provide two different upgrade paths as a way to hopefully keep up with future developments and advancements. Among the several designs considered for this role, the Fw-190, designed by the famous engineer Kurt Tank, was the obvious pick. It used a radial engine, which meant that it wouldn't be competing with other fighters for DB600 series inline engines, and it still offered highly competitive performance. Tank decided that a radial engine was worth trying for a number of reasons, but there were still some early problems. In short, Tank tried out a new design for cooling a radial engine using a fan inside of a more tapered aerodynamic cowling. This reduced drag, but it turned out to not cool the engine very well, and the final design went back to a more conventional-sized cowling, but still retained the fan. Now, despite the failure of the streamlined cowling, the 190 still ended up using a lot of highly innovative features for the time. For example, it had push rods for the controls instead of metal cables and pulleys, resulting in considerably less maintenance. The 190 was also one of the first fighters in the world to primarily use electrically actuated mechanisms instead of hydraulics or pneumatics for the landing gear, which also retracted inwards instead of outwards, giving it a much wider wheelbase and made it considerably easier to land and handle on the ground. The cockpit used a new bubble canopy design constructed by vacuum forming, which dramatically improved pilot visibility, along with a pretty long list of other smaller innovations. With over 20,000 examples built, the Fw-190 went on to serve until the end of the war and was later developed into dozens of other versions, but those are all stories for another time. What we're looking at in War Thunder today is the Fw-190 A-1, a fighter in Rank 2 of the German air tree at battle rating 3.0. This plane has no external weapons, and its primary armament is a set of 4 7.92mm machine guns, along with a pair of 20mm cannons. This is generally a pretty good amount of firepower for Rank 2. You get a typical ammo belt selection for both types of guns. I usually prefer the universal belt for the 7.92mm and the air targets belt for the 20mm, which gives the cannons a high ratio of Minengeschoss ammo, which can be devastating in this BR bracket. If you have a really good feel for both sets of guns, you can also go with the stealth belts and get a slightly harder punch at the cost of more difficult aiming. When it comes to flight performance, the A1 version of the Fw-190 is, overall, very comparable to other planes in Rank 2. It's reasonably fast, has good flight performance, and it rolls pretty well. What it's not great at are sustained rate turns and instantaneous AOA turns. A lot of the more agile dogfighters of this BR, like Spitfires, Yaks, or most of the Japanese fighters, are just going to run circles around the 190 if you get sucked into a horizontal turn fight. It's not hopeless though. The 190 has pretty good energy retention, which you can combine with its engine power to add a little bit of vertical climb into a sustained turn, and if you're lucky, you might stall the other guy out before he gets a gun angle on you. Plus, it can drop its flaps to juice a little more AOA out of a turn at the cost of some energy retention, so be careful and use them sparingly. I tried to show a variety of different flap usage in the gameplay footage with this vid so that you can see the different results. Another thing to be aware of is that the plane's performance is pretty bad at higher altitudes. The highest you ever want to try and fight with this thing is around 5,000 meters, and even at that altitude, you're already going to get some performance degradation. The 190 is happier the lower it is, which, well, it's kinda unfortunate given the climb to win meta in most War Thunder matches at this BR. More on fighting tactics in a minute. Some good news, though, is that the engine cooling is actually pretty good. Remember, they scrapped that flawed cowling design and went with the normal one, so you can be a little bit more generous with the WEP on this plane than a lot of other prop fighters, and it doesn't boil the oil nearly as fast as a lot of the inline engine planes do. When you take the Fw-190 A-1 into air battles, you're going to want to focus on air combat. Even when grinding the upgrades, just stick to being a fighter and skip the ground targets. Generally speaking, this plane does pretty well with boom and zoom vulture tactics if you can get an altitude advantage early in the match, or like if you're in a smaller match and you can take out the couple of red team guys who matched your climb rate. It's only average at conventional dogfighting thanks to the unimpressive turn performance, but if you use vertical maneuvers like high yo-yos and just steep climbs to try and energy trap people, it's not a struggle bus. One thing I want to highlight for this plane that I don't usually talk too much about in these reviews is primary weapon selection. This is a plane where you want to make sure your keybinds are set up to swap between the 20mm cannons and the lower caliber machine guns, because the difference in ammo is so pronounced and the machine guns can give you a little bit more utility. Now, since you have so much low caliber ammo, you can swap to the machine guns and use kind of more spray and pray shots, or like take pot shots at someone who's running away from you, that sort of thing, and then only switch back to using the cannons, or selecting all guns, when you're in close and ready to take shorter ranged shots. You're going to run out of cannon ammo pretty quickly, at least compared to the machine guns, so try to practice with your primary weapon selection. Over a ground battle, the plane is pretty good at doing air cover, since you can out-dogfight most of the ground attack planes at this BR pretty easily, and air combat over a ground battle usually doesn't escalate up to higher altitudes where your performance would drop off. You don't get any AP belts for the cannons, so you're generally going to be limited to attacking lighter ground targets, and my advice is just to stick to air combat regardless of the game mode. Visually, I've always thought the Fw-190 series are great looking planes, and the A-1 is where it all started. No interesting paint jobs or anything, but it's still a good looking fighter without any obvious problems on the 3D model. Landing this plane is a lot easier than some other Rank 2 fighters. It's got a really wide wheelbase and it's well balanced, so it usually won't flip over even if you lock up the brakes pretty hard. No air brake or anything though, so dumping the last bit of airspeed can be a little flaky. You can throw the gear and landing flaps out at about 300 kilometers an hour. The cockpit provides excellent all-around visibility, especially if you kind of scoot up a little bit in your seat. The instruments are easy to find, and I had no problem flying the plane in VR. Really good experience with the headset. To close out on the Fw-190 A-1. This plane has a fairly good amount of firepower for Rank 2. It gets tons of ammo for its machine guns. It's got useful combat flaps that can help in turn fights if used carefully, and it's got good energy retention. However, its sustained and instant AoE turn performance are both pretty unimpressive. Its ammo for the 20mm cannons is kinda limited, and it's got almost no potential for ground attack. The final verdict on the Fw-190 A-1 is that this plane is a fairly average performer for Rank 2, and I'd consider it to be pretty beginner-friendly. If you're just getting started with the German air tree, or even if you're new to War Thunder entirely, this is a great plane to use to grind out the rest of Rank 2, or even a good chunk of Rank 3. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, the algorithm wants you to check this next one out.